Welcome back, everybody. I am going to get this pump back in this 1550. I know it's harvest time, but got some rain, and so I guess, we find something to do. So do a few little, I don't know, housekeeping items, little things that ought to be done, like this elbow. I just had the new one. There it is. As I mentioned before, this elbow right here goes to a relief valve for the 3-point lift cylinder. And that way, if you hit a bump and the whole 3-point hitch comes up and comes back down, it could blow this housing out with that shock load. Well, this relief valve will open and let some of the oil out so that things don't go bad. Well, this cast iron elbow they used is not up to the challenge all the time and occasionally breaks right off, and then you got no 3-point hitch. So it's a easy fix, if you're already here and got the right size. Oh my, a crescent wrench won't fit in there. How embarrassing. You got the right wrench and everything. And then you can probably go to a hardware store and get a better Schedule 80 steel. Or if you do want to order the official part, it's a 30-3042766. Come on. And it's just a 90-degree, I'd say that's 1/4-inch pipe thread. It's definitely pipe thread. But a lot heavier duty than this old Street L. So let me get a proper wrench. I want to turn on this part in here, because if I turn on the bigger part, it could unthread itself. I think it's staked to hold it all together. And once again, I'm 3/4 is too big. 9/16. Let go. There. I felt it move. Someone didn't want that one coming loose. I'm sure it's been in there since the factory. No pipe sealant on it, but I guess if it seeped a little bit, it's just going right back into the hydraulic reservoir, so you're not going to lose it. But I'm going to put pipe sealant on it, because if it does leak, then the 3-point hitch can settle. Oh, one of my viewers recommended this leak lock stuff, and I gotta say I'm pretty impressed with it. Don't need a whole bunch on there, getting off and floating in the hydraulic system. Maybe that's why Oliver put none on. Oh yeah. Now before I put that in, I guess I could still put this part in. But I'm going to put some compressed air in and blow that piston out so that I can reseal that. That makes that a little easier. And would you believe this? There it goes. Let's say this ain't the same size. So, air. Okay, it's going to come shooting out the end, so you want to be careful. That wasn't too bad. It's just, these earlier ones are just an O-ring and a backup washer. I'm getting leak lock on there. This stuff sticks pretty good. Now that backup washer doesn't look none too hot. I don't think I got one of those. I might have to go looking for parts. Usually they're all right. All they do is back it up. They give the O-ring something a little softer to push against because the oil is coming from this way, pushing the cylinder this way. So you got all this pressure. The O-ring sealing around the outside, but then when it hits the piston here, you got this sharp edge and stuff. So the backup washer gives it a nice surface to go against. And that one is shot. And then we can maybe see, but I could definitely see, there is a flat side to that O-ring now. So yeah, it was time for that to get done. So I will have to do some digging, see if I got a backup washer. Should have ordered one. Maybe I can dig one up. I found a new backup washer. Of course, getting that baby on there. This is an old leather one. It's new old stock. So I got to be careful not to stretch it too far. It's leather, it'll stretch. New ones are some kind of rubbery plastic, PTFE or something. Oh. Come on, you can do it. Little tidbit, this is the same size piston as a 1600 or a 1650. So that kind of helps because I had already rounded up this stuff to do the 1600 that I'm restoring. And I bought two just in case I ruin one, because they're cheap enough to get away with that. There we go. Remember, as I said, this is the end with the part number on it here is the pressure end. So you want the backup washer on that side. The backup washer, if you want to order one, is a 105528A. You can still get that from Agco, I believe. And the O-ring that we harvested. Oh, let me show you the part number on that one. That one substitutes to a 709-23830. Just a exact same one. Agco just already had that in some other application, probably an Allis-Chalmers thing or something, and rather than stocking it under two different part numbers, they just put it under the one. There we go. New O-ring, new backup washer. I'll grease this up and we'll tap her on home. Let's see, pressure end, O-ring, backup ring. This is pretty straightforward. Put it in a hole. You can even take the rod and push it all the way down. No signs of O-ring or backup ring got sliced. That should be good. Let's turn this back on its side and we'll get that relief valve back on it. It's been slowly drilling oil all over the table. And once again, this probably doesn't really matter if it has sealant on it, because any that leaks by goes into the hydraulic reservoir, so you're not going to lose it. But if it leaks, it is going to let the 3-point settle. So. One other thing I want to point out while we're right here is something that can go wrong with the servo valve. I've run into this a few times in my time. Right here on the back is like a machine screw with a double nut. And that hooks into the main spool of the servo valve. It's just a spring in there. It's hooked onto that screw and it's hooked onto the spool. Roll pin goes through the spool, and I've had a few of them where that one of the eyes broke off the end of the spring, and so the easiest thing to do is if you pull out on that, the spring should pull it back. And if that spring is broken, there's nothing to pull that spool back, and then your 3-point will act funky. Not guaranteeing that's necessarily the problem with your, but it's definitely something to look out for. Easy, you can take the top cover off, take that link out that goes between here and hook this with something and just pull on it. And if it doesn't have that springiness, either it's stuck or that spring is broken. And that one I've just always just taken that, well, you can pull the spool right out without the spring hooked up, and I've just bent a new eye on the end of the spring. Just take one of the coils and heat it up just a little bit right there where it can bend and make a new hook. Hook that back onto the spool, hook it onto the bolt, tighten it back up to, well, there ain't much sticking out there, but I'm sure there's a setting for it. Just measure how much bolt's sticking out back here before you take the nuts off from it. And then this cap just kind of, it sits in there. So that's not too tough to get out. But just something to look for if you're trying to chase down gremlins. Not sure why your 3-point hitch ain't working right. That can definitely be one of them. Another thing I want to tackle is there are seals for these remote levers. And there's a lip seal and then an O-ring. And when they get old and stiff and stuff, then oil starts leaking around here. It gets annoying. One of the common questions I hear is about these wires coming out of the bottom of the levers. They were for Oliver's hydroelectric system, and they allowed the operator with a push of this button right here. You could change the depth stop collar on your remote cylinder from your seat. So if you wanted to change how far down it was going to go, you'd just bump it forward a little more. But if you wanted to change the height some, you'd push this button. That would engage an electromagnet that would hold the plate. You'd lift the cylinder a little bit, and the stop plate would still stay with the cylinder. The rod would go out. And when you let go of the button, that would release the magnet, and then the stop plate would stay on the rod where it was at. Then under normal use, you just push the lever forward and lock in. The cylinder would go down. When the switch on the cylinder hit that stop plate, it would kick out the circuit, and the lever would return back to neutral. Same with going up. Lever would stay in. When it got to the end of the stroke, the lever would kick back out. There's solenoids in the cover. But of course, years of neglect and whatnot, they get like this. I mean, there's just not much left to it there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut them off because these wires are definitely useless at this point. The good news is you can use them with any regular cylinder. You do not need the wiring. So if you want to cut the wires off like I'm doing here, you're not going to hurt a thing. There is a fuse in the dash for the hydroelectric. You might want to pull that out. If something shorts out, it'll blow on its own, but why risk a fire? Yeah, there's 3 fuses in the dash. One's for the gauges, one's for hydroelectric, and one's for lights. I think they're in that order, but if you pull one and your lights don't work or your gauge don't work, you know you got the wrong one. Well, this is another one of those easier while it's in or out things. Let's see, let's flip this lever around. Oh, the gasket harvest was good this year. I feel like I'm going to bust a knuckle on that one. The downside of trying to do these in the tractor is the fender's to the right here. And so sometimes you have to take the rod out, or I'm sorry, the fender off to get the rod out if it's still on the tractor. So that's why it's a good time to do it now. And it's a cheap fix, just an O-ring and a little seal. You're talking probably $5 worth of parts. The other thing you can do is there's 2 bolts that hold this whole cast iron assembly with a 3-point. You have to take this link off for the 3-point, and then you can take the 2 bolts off that hold this, take the cover off, take the bolts that hold these arms off, and then you can take the whole thing out, and you only have to come out yay far before you can swing it sideways. You have to buy a gasket for there, but compared to taking a fender off, that's pretty easy. These washers that are in the middle there engage the shaft to keep it locked in. And I'm going to have to get something to pry that one out. Careful not to drop it, especially if you're still on the tractor. You always put a magnet down there and fish it out. And then we can stick this screwdriver in there. Hit it with the old meat hammer. Screwdriver in there. That'll spread it just a little with a little tap. And then voila. It slides out. We'll clean all the crud out of there before we put it back in. And we might as well do the other one while we're at it. There's the other. Your 3-point hitch lever brake is behind this nut. You can reach in there with a screwdriver, and when things are clean, it's easier to see. But you can, well, that'd be loosening. But you can hit that with a hammer or something, tighten this nut up. There's a spring behind it, puts a little more pressure on this lever. And then there's a fiber disc behind that, which ain't looking the best. Maybe I'll put a new one of those in there while I'm at it too. I probably got one of those on hand. We'll just take her off so we can put a new friction disc in there. As long as we're this close. Guess that's a good thing about it leaking. Nothing's rusted up. Ow. As you can see, that brake disc was shot. It should not be in pieces like that. And there is threads. And then there is the O-ring. There we go. There's some of the brake material on the lever. Well, you pretty much need to take that out anyways, because that's how you get to the O-ring. Yep. So yeah, if you're going to change that O-ring, which, like I said, you're in there, might as well do it. Got to screw that out. So might as well order a new brake disc while you're at it. I'm pretty sure like Corvus Oliver has them, Maybach's. But there's something else I have to dig up. I think that before I put the levers and stuff back in and have extra things to mess up, I guess essentially, I'm going to tip this up, get the pump and the 3-point cylinder back in, then I can tip it back down, then do all this top stuff, put the cover back on, and then it should be ready to go in. Oh, and I got to tap out that hole for that lift arm retainer clip. Oh, I'm remembering other things. This is, if you watched my video on putting power beyond on Allen 1650, this is the return port here. And boy, it ain't gonna get any easier to try to get that thing out. Jamie, the owner of this tractor, is talking like he might want to get a loader for it. And so it might possibly need this port. So I told him I'd make sure I could get it freed up for him. Because the nice thing is I can put heat to it from the inside and the outside and not burn up any seals. And it's starting to look like I should set it down. I'm just fighting myself. It looks like someone's tried turning on it before. No go. All right, when in doubt, burn it out. Probably gonna need more, but let's give it a try. Something's going, but I don't think it's the right thing. More heat. Go, baby. It went. Woo! Nelly. I think we'll get a new plug for that hole. Yeah, whatever they sealed them up with from the factory was potent stuff. So if you have this off for some, to do some work in here, while you got it apart, this is a good time to get that plug out. You might not need it now, but you might need it later. And you can just, don't look bad. And they never leaked from the factory. This hole doesn't go all the way through, so we'll just go until we hit the bottom. I got a new one of these little rubber seal things. Might as well, as long as I'm right here. Not terrible, but a little looseness in them. Oh, out of stroke. Who does that? Oh, let's throw caution to the wind. It shouldn't come out very hard. This is what we were after. Now whether to press the bearings onto the gear first or to put them in the spacers. And a stroke again. That's up against the snap ring. Ooh, that fit in kind of loose. Well, I've got another spacer. Let's try that. Well, that one fits in kind of loose. Well, we'll just have to solve that problem. Degreasing on the affected surfaces. A little Loctite number 640. Getting time for a new bottle. Don't want a whole lot in there. Don't need it to get into stuff it doesn't need to be in. Wipe away any excess. That feels much better. Wait a minute. I got that upside down. Whew, that's close. But now I gotta find a more appropriate driver. That ought to work. Shouldn't go on too hard. We need the snap ring facing out on both of these. Then it can't come off, you know, the bearing can't come off. Didn't even have to pump. Just enough friction to... Yes. And no wobble. I like it. Okay. Well, this is straight cut gears. Both these pieces are the same. So it really doesn't matter which direction it goes in. Let's try this direction. Okay. That spacer, not this one, the other one, obviously spun a little bit and ain't fitting quite as tight as this one. So I am going to put some Loctite 640 in that inner area. Well, I'll just put some right on this spacer sleeve. Goes. We'll turn that front one doesn't want to turn, that spacer, but I got the old Loctite in there, so that should hopefully set up and keep that from turning. Overall, it wants to turn in the bearing, but giving that a little turn will help spread that Loctite around. It's kind of getting kind of early for this Loctite to get stiff, but snap ring goes in, slices your finger. I should be wearing gloves. Whee! So close. There. Everything is turning where it should, like it should. This gear is out of a 1600. It's got the bigger shaft like a 1650, so the 1650 pump should fit it no problem. Maybe I should have tried it first. That could be embarrassing. That stud's going to have to come out because the bolt is captured in the 1650 pump. Got a different flange and whatnot. So that's keeping it from getting close enough. The advantage of a stud is you can put sealant on the threads and you don't have to worry about oil going from one compartment to the other because the gear is in transmission fluid. And so this is sealed because you got hydraulic fluid on this side. Yeah, that's going to work. But we might have to ditch the return dump. There's a tube that fits on this side here, comes down and goes to there. And that's not gonna, I think that's gonna interfere with that. Yeah, something's gonna have to change there. Because let's see, this goes like so. And that looks like a smaller size. I might just leave it out. Let's screw it out. Here's what I've got. Here's that cap that had the hole drilled in it. I think that creates some restriction on the return so it doesn't hammer quite so hard. And this is just a 1/4-inch pipe to JIC fitting that's about the same size hole. So it should cause the same amount of restriction, just won't stick down so far and get in the way of the new pump. And if you're wondering why it's not fitting, if you haven't seen part 1 of this, I am replacing, this is a 1550 and it's getting a 1650 pump. So I had to change this gear here, and it's a newer style pump, so it's got a different tube that connects everything. So just having to make some accommodations to make it all work. Well, in case I didn't record it right, I got the tube in. These bolts are just loose. O-ring down there. That'll give me a little wiggle room. New O-ring there. Copper washers on the mounting bolts so oil can't work its way through that way. A fresh gasket. And let's slide her in there. Okay, before I get things tightened down, I want to get these bolts in while I can still possibly wiggle things. There's a copper crush washer under this bolt as well. It's the same one that was already in there. Click. All right. Let's tighten these down. Threading into aluminum, so we don't want to get too nuts on the torque there. I'm sure there's a specification for it. Get these lower ones. That should be it for the pump install. Pump is installed. Turns nice. The spacers don't turn. That's good. On to putting in the lift cylinder. Let's get that, let that flop around. Piston rod in. There we go, that way. Will the ratchet fit in there? Hey, it will. We'll grab her with the end wrench just to be sure. Yeah. That's in. I don't think I've forgotten anything down here. Pump. Took all the caps out, suction's open, took the cap out of that. Tighten down, tighten. We checked all of them. This is in. All right, everything else goes from the top side. So I'm gonna pick up tools and flip this baby back over. I did almost forget one thing. Gotta bolt that on. But also I want to change the needle bearing that's in it. So let's do that. We'll get it bolted down, then we'll flip it over. Ah, come on. Just don't go flying. There. There's a thrust washer. And then the bearings in the middle. Yeah, look how much gap there is between the rollers. You could shove a whole extra roller in there. I will use my Craftsman seal, or I'm sorry, this ain't a sealed. It's a bearing driver, bearing removal tool. Surprised the needles didn't jump out. For installation, I've got the OTC 05 bearing driver. Something a little more official. Oop. Okay, the thrust washer that I did not remove is still on there. And we'll put it back the way we found it. There is a bevel offset that was facing towards the mount. Thrust washer and a stamp ring. Got a little end play, which is fine for a straight cut gear. Feels much better than it did before. Just making sure the surfaces are clean. You can see there's a drilling right there that faces up. So as the oil gets carried up the gears and slung around, it drips down and goes in that hole and helps feed that needle bearing we just changed. Now I think it's ready to flip. Okay, first thing I want to do, get the piston back in there. That was easy enough. Before we put the levers back on for the hydraulics, that's going to open up a lot more room to get the link in for the 3-point. I wanted to double check the book because this is a mistake that gets made a lot. So that's the front of the tractor, that way, front. And this 3-pin link that I'll be putting in a second goes on the left side, and then there's a notch cut on the top and the bottom, and those need to face the front of the tractor. It's easy enough to flip it over and put it with the notches facing the back, and that just throws the geometry off because those 3 pins are not evenly spaced, as we'll soon see. Here it is. You can see 2 pins are closer together than the other 2 pins. That just changes everything. So we need to stab it into 3 holes all at the same time. Spring goes on top of it. Bolt comes out. It has a roll pin to line it up, which is still in the housing. Get out of there, you. Okay, where were we? Putting this bar on the left side, putting this connecting link on the left side with the wedge facing forward and hitting 3 holes all at the same time. There's 2 out of 3. And we just have this one that actually comes from the lever. And I lost it. There. All three are in. This wedge is, or cutoff is facing the front. It's on the left side. We should be good. Now to get some clips on those. That's going to be a lot easier without those remote levers in the way. We're going to give this a whirl, but the light and the camera take a lot of room. Ping, where'd it go? Okay, let's try this again. Maybe I'll start on the top one just to get the mood. Two. All right, it's just one of those things in life that goes easier when no one's watching. Well, this is the guilty party for most of the leaks out here at the lever. I already pried the old one out. Just a little lip seal, but it gets old and hard and dry and leaks eventually. And so I cross-referenced it, and it is the same as an SKF 4912. Let's use the old one as a driver. That's got it down in there. I dug through my stash. I found an O-ring. This is 1/8 inch O-ring with a 7/8 inch outside diameter. That goes in here to seal the larger of the two remote levers. There, that's in there. Was able to find a new one of these. Clean this baby up, and oh, I should probably put the lever on there too. So it goes like so, and so, and so, and you just thread it in. I tighten this down until you can feel a decent amount of friction. Everything's going to kind of seat in after a little while, so it's probably better to start out a little tighter and it'll loosen up a little as those parts seat into each other. I also think this is out of adjustment because that link was in wrong before. They probably readjusted this to make it work right, so I'm gonna have to readjust it, which I'm getting low on space on the camera, and this video is getting long, so there'll probably be a part 3 where I put it back on the tractor and adjust all this stuff. Next up is the inner hydraulic lever, which is the hollow one. You want to make sure it's clean right in this area. That's where the O-ring seals. And we got to get the other part on the inside. There's only a slot on one side, so it only goes one way. That might make a difference. It did. Second remote goes in. I want to make sure that seal area is not rusted up or something crazy. Just gotta line that slot up somewhere. That looks right. When you pulled the cover off, you should have noticed these spools. Some stay with the cover, some stay with the base, but they've got O-ring on each side, and they're for the pressurized oil that goes to the remotes. This is where the pressurized oil enters the cover. Left remote's back here, right remote's here, and then this is where the pressurized oil goes back down in for the 3-point hitch. And the gasket is just to keep oil from seeping out. It doesn't hold any pressure. So I'm going to clean these up and put new O-rings on them and stick them in. I put a film of grease on them so they slide in easier. And then it's just a matter of popping them all in. When we put this cover on, those arms are shooting for these roll pins right here. These arms. So you gotta kind of work the levers to get them to drop in. And oh, I'm almost out of time on this camera. It took a couple of cracks at it, but not much time left. The lever goes forward and back, returns the neutral. You can kind of hear that click, hopefully, but it's in. Like I say, I didn't have much camera time left, so I didn't run it, but it took a couple up and downs to get it in the right spot. Leftover parts. See, hydraulic pump, we expected that. Elbow. Hey, that's where that bolt was. Studs for the pump, didn't need those. Drain tube, O-rings, seals from the bearings that I was cheaper with seals and just pop them out. Dowel pins that I'll need to put the pan back on. Bolts that held the pump and its suction thing on. And there's the other bolt. The memory card got full on the GoPro. So I'll just finish up with my phone here. And no extra parts that were unexpected. How about we put it that way? Have to get the pan on. It's still sitting on the tractor. Put it over there to just help keep stuff from falling in. And let's see, I need to tighten this baby up. This one you just snug it up, and then the sealing nut, you tighten that up. Otherwise the 3-point hitch won't work. And I'll get him a new plug for that hole. And I think it's ready to go on the tractor. So we'll call that a video, part 2. And there will be a part 3, getting that back on the tractor and trying it out. Should be able to put it on an auger or something here during harvest. Give it a whirl before I send it back to its owner. As always, appreciate everybody watching, and we will see you in the next one.